Marcus Wellington stepped out of his black limousine, his expensive Italian shoes clicking against the marble steps of the royal palace. As one of the most powerful tech billionaires in the world, he was used to people bowing down to him. His company controlled half the world's internet traffic, and governments around the globe sought his favor. Today, he was here for a private meeting with the king about a massive technology contract worth billions. The palace guards stood at attention in their traditional red uniforms, their faces stern and professional. Marcus barely glanced at them as he strode toward the entrance, his personal assistant struggling to keep up with his quick pace. "Hey, sir. Please remember the palace protocols," his assistant whispered nervously. "We need to show proper respect to the royal guards and follow their instructions." Marcus waved him off dismissively. "I don't have time for medieval nonsense. They should be grateful I'm even here." As they approached the main entrance, a tall royal guard stepped forward. Captain James Morrison had served the royal family for 15 years. His uniform was immaculate, his posture perfect, and his dedication unwavering. He had protected kings, queens, and countless dignitaries, always maintaining the highest standards of honor and duty. "Good morning, sir," Captain Morrison said, politely but firmly. "Welcome to the royal palace. I need to conduct a security check before you can proceed." Marcus stopped abruptly, his face twisting with annoyance. "Do you know who I am? I'm Marcus Wellington. I don't wait for anyone, and I certainly don't get searched by palace servants." The captain remained calm and professional. "I understand. Sir, however, security protocols apply to all visitors without exception. This is for the safety of His Majesty." Other visitors nearby began to notice the tension. Tourists with cameras, palace staff, and even some reporters who had been waiting for interviews started gathering at a distance. Sensing something unusual was happening, Marcus felt his anger rising. In his world of corporate boardrooms and private jets, no one ever dared to challenge him. His face turned red as he stepped closer to the guard. "Listen here, you uniformed monkey. I could buy this entire palace if I wanted to. Now get out of my way before I have you fired." Captain Morrison's jaw tightened slightly, but he maintained his composure. "Sir, I must insist on following proper procedures. Please cooperate with the security check." The crowd was growing larger now. Some people had their phones out, recording the confrontation. Marcus noticed the cameras and felt even more humiliated. Dare this nobody embarrass him in public? "You want me to bow down to you like everyone else does?" Marcus snarled, his voice getting louder. "You think your little uniform makes you special? You're nothing but a glorified doorman." Captain took a deep breath. He had dealt with difficult visitors before, but something about this man's arrogance was particularly disturbing. Still, he remained professional. "Sir, I'm simply doing my job. I ask for your cooperation and respect." Marcus had reached his breaking point. The combination of being delayed, challenged, and now recorded by strangers was too much for his enormous ego to handle. His hands clenched into fists as he stared at the guard who dared to stand in his way. The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace courtyard as the tension continued to build. Nobody could have predicted what would happen next, or how this moment would change everything for both men forever. Without warning, Marcus Wellington's hand flew through the air and struck Captain Morrison hard across the face. The sound echoed through the courtyard like a gunshot. The crowd gasped collectively, and several people screamed in shock. The royal guard stumbled backward, his hand instinctively going to his stinging cheek. Blood began to trickle from a small cut where Marcus's heavy signet ring had scraped the skin. For a moment, time seemed frozen. The captain's eyes widened in disbelief, not just from the physical pain, but from the sheer audacity of what had just happened. "How you do?" There, Marcus shouted, his face twisted with rage and satisfaction. "Maybe now you'll remember your place." "I don't bow to anyone, especially not to some pathetic guard." The crowd erupted into chaos. The cameras flashed continuously as reporters pushed forward to get better shots. Tourists stood with their mouths hanging open, unable to believe they were witnessing such a scene. Palace staff members rushed toward the commotion, their faces pale with horror. Marcus's assistant grabbed his arm frantically. "Sir, please, we need to leave immediately. This is going to be a disaster. But Marcus was beyond reason now. The adrenaline of asserting his power had taken over completely. "Did you see that?" he called out to the crowd, his voice booming across the courtyard. "It's what happens when people forget who runs the world. Money and power, not fancy uniforms." Captain Morrison slowly straightened up, wiping the blood from his face with the back of his hand. His fellow guards had witnessed everything but were bound by strict protocols about when they could intervene. They watched in tense silence, their hands hovering near their ceremonial weapons, waiting for their captain's signal. The captain looked at Marcus with a mixture of sadness and determination. In all his years of service, he had never been assaulted by a visitor. He had faced down armed intruders, dealt with threatening protesters, and maintained order during chaotic events. But this was something entirely different. This was a powerful man who believed he could hurt others without consequences. "Sir," Captain Morrison said quietly, his voice steady despite the pain. "You have just committed assault against a member of the Royal Guard. You have also shown disrespect to His Majesty's household." Marcus laughed coldly. "And what are you going to do about it? Call the police. I own half the judges in this city. I'll have you thrown in prison for interfering with my business." What Marcus didn't know was that his assault had been captured by more than just tourist cameras. The palace's advanced security system had recorded everything in high definition from multiple angles. More importantly, someone very special had been watching from a window high above the courtyard. The king himself had been preparing for their meeting. When he heard the commotion outside, he had moved to his office window and witnessed the entire incident. His face was grave as he picked up his phone and made a call that would change everything. Meanwhile, in the courtyard, Captain Morrison made a decision that would surprise everyone. Instead of retaliating or calling for backup, he did something completely unexpected. He began to remove his ceremonial white gloves, one finger at a time. His movements deliberate and calm, the crowd watched in fascination, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Marcus continued to rant about his wealth and power, but his voice began to falter as he noticed the strange silence that had fallen over everyone else. "What are you doing?" Marcus demanded, suddenly feeling less confident as he watched the captains. Methodical movements, Captain Morrison finished removing his gloves and tucked them carefully into his belt. Then he did something that made the entire crowd hold its breath. He began to speak, but not in the formal tone he had used before. His voice carried a different kind of authority now, one that came from deep within his character rather than from his uniform. "Mr. Wellington," Captain Morrison said, his voice carrying across the silent courtyard with quiet power. "You seem to believe that money and position give you the right to hurt others? You think my uniform makes me less than you? Allow me to share something about the man wearing this uniform." Marcus shifted uncomfortably, confused by the captain's calm demeanor. The crowd pressed closer, sensing they were about to witness something extraordinary. "My name is James Morrison," the captain continued, "and before I chose to serve as a Royal Guard, I was Captain James Morrison of the Special Air Service. I spent 12 years in the military's most elite unit, completing missions that your government will never acknowledge publicly." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The Special Air Service was legendary, known for producing the world's most skilled and disciplined soldiers. Marcus's confident smirk began to fade. "I served in Afghanistan, Iraq, and several other places that don't appear on any official records. I earned 3 medals for valor, saved countless lives, and led men into situations where death was more likely than survival. I could have continued that path, earning medals and recognition." Captain Morrison paused, touching the spot where Marcus had struck him. "But I chose this uniform instead. Do you know why, Mr. Wellington?" Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came out. The crowd waited in complete silence. "I chose this position because I believe in service, real service, not the kind where you serve yourself while others bow down. I chose to protect something bigger than my own ego. I chose honor over glory, duty over recognition." The captain's words carried a weight that seemed to press down on everyone present. Even the other guards stood straighter, reminded of why they had chosen their own paths of service. "You struck me because I wouldn't bow to your wealth, Captain," Morrison continued. "But you don't understand what you're looking at. This uniform represents something your money can't buy. It represents men and women who chose to put others before themselves. Marcus felt a strange sensation in his chest. For the first time in years, he was hearing someone speak about values that had nothing to do with profit margins or stock prices. But his pride wouldn't let him back down. "Spare me the military hero speech," Marcus snapped, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "You're still just a guard, and I'm still the one with billions of dollars and the power to destroy careers." Captain Morrison nodded slowly. "You're absolutely right about your wealth and influence. But let me tell you what else I am, Mr. Wellington. I'm also the son of Margaret Morrison, who spent 40 years as a schoolteacher in the poorest district of London. She taught children whose parents worked 3 jobs just to afford basic meals." The captain's voice grew stronger as he continued. "My mother never earned more than £30,000 a year, but she changed hundreds of lives. She stayed late every day to help struggling students. She spent her own money on supplies when the school couldn't afford them. She believed that every child deserved a chance to succeed, regardless of their family's bank account." Marcus felt an uncomfortable memory stirring. His own childhood had been different, filled with private tutors and exclusive schools. But he remembered one teacher who had tried to instill values beyond achievement and competition. "I'm also the brother of Sarah Morrison, who works as a nurse in the children's cancer ward," Captain Morrison continued. "She holds the hands of dying children and comforts their parents during the worst moments of their lives. Her shift ends at 6, but she often stays until midnight because a scared child needs someone to sit with them." The crowd was completely captivated now. Several people had tears in their eyes as they listened to the captain describe his family. "And I'm the husband of Emma Morrison, who runs a shelter for homeless veterans," the captain said, his voice filled with love and pride. "She helps men and women who gave everything for their country, but came home to find themselves forgotten. She fights bureaucracy and funding cuts every day to keep them fed and housed." Marcus felt something cracking inside his chest. The captain's words were painting a picture of a life so different from his own that it seemed to come from another planet. "Captain." Morrison looked directly into Marcus's eyes. "So when you look at me, Mr. Wellington, you're not just seeing a guard. You're seeing someone who comes from service, who chose service, and who understands that real power comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down." The silence in the courtyard was broken by the sound of approaching footsteps. A distinguished man in an elegant suit walked toward them, flanked by several officials. The crowd immediately recognized him and began to bow respectfully. It was King Edward himself, and his expression was serious. Marcus straightened up quickly, smoothing his jacket and trying to regain his composure. This was his chance to salvage the situation. After all, he was here for an important business meeting, and the king needed his technology services. "Your Majesty," Marcus said with a forced smile, extending his hand for a handshake, "I apologize for this unfortunate delay. Your guard here was being unnecessarily difficult about security procedures. Perhaps we could discuss this privately and move on to our important business meeting." King Edward stopped several feet away and did not extend his hand in return. His eyes moved from Marcus to Captain Morrison, taking in the guard's injured face and dignified posture. "Mr. Wellington," the king said in a voice that carried absolute authority, "I witnessed the entire incident from my office window. I saw you strike my guard when he was simply performing his sworn duty to protect this palace and everyone in it." Marcus's confident expression faltered. "Your Majesty, surely you understand that in the business world, we sometimes need to assert ourselves when faced with unnecessary obstacles. I'm sure we can work this out like civilized men." The king's expression grew even more stern. "Civilized men, Mr. Wellington? Striking an unarmed man who is treating you with respect, your definition of civilized behavior?" The crowd held its breath as they watched this confrontation between two of the most powerful men in the country. Cameras continued to record every moment, knowing they were capturing something historic. Captain Morrison, the king, addressed his guard directly. "Please report on what transpired here." Captain Morrison stood at attention. "Your Majesty, Mr. Wellington became agitated when I requested to conduct standard security screening. I explained that protocols must be followed for everyone's safety. He became verbally abusive and then struck me across the face." The king nodded, then turned back to Marcus. Mr. Wellington, you came here today expecting me to sign a contract. That would make your company the exclusive technology provider for all royal communications. A contract worth $12 billion. Marcus's eyes lit up with hope. Perhaps the king was simply establishing the importance of their relationship before moving past this minor incident. Yes, Your Majesty. Company offers unparalleled service and cutting-edge technology that would benefit the entire realm. This small misunderstanding shouldn't overshadow the tremendous opportunities ahead of us. King Edward walked closer to Captain Morrison and examined the cut on his face. The guard remained perfectly still as his sovereign inspected the injury.
Captain Morrison,
the king said quietly, in your 15 years of service to the royal family, have you ever failed to perform your duties with honor and distinction? No, Your Majesty. Have you ever shown disrespect to any visitor, regardless of their status or attitude? No, Your Majesty. Have you ever used your position to humiliate or harm anyone under your protection? Never, Your Majesty. The king straightened up and turned to face Marcus again. Mr. Wellington, you seem to believe that your wealth entitles you to treat others as inferior beings. You think that success in business gives you the right to assault those who serve with honor. Marcus began to sense that this conversation wasn't going in the direction he had hoped. Your Majesty, I think we may be making too much of a simple misunderstanding. Perhaps we could discuss this privately away from these cameras and crowds. On the contrary, King Edward replied, his voice growing stronger. I believe this matter requires the full light of public attention. You see, Mr. Wellington, Captain Morrison didn't just tell you about his military service and his family's dedication to helping others. There's something else you should know about this man you struck. The king paused, letting his words sink. And before continuing, Captain Morrison's youngest sister, Lucy, was diagnosed with a rare form of childhood leukemia 3 years ago. The treatment required experimental procedures that weren't covered by standard healthcare. Marcus felt a cold dread beginning to form in his stomach. The treatment cost over £200,000, the king continued. Captain Morrison sold his house, emptied his savings, and took loans against his military pension to pay for his sister's care. He moved his family into a small apartment and took a second job working nights as a security guard to make ends meet. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. But even with all his sacrifices, it wasn't enough, King Edward said. So Captain Morrison did something extraordinary. He wrote letters to dozens of wealthy individuals and corporations, asking for help. Not for himself, but for a dying child who had never hurt anyone. King Edward reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. One of those letters came to me, Mr. Wellington. But it also came to you. Captain Morrison wrote to Wellington Technologies, requesting assistance for his dying sister's medical treatment. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face as the king unfolded the letter. The royal's voice carried clearly across the silent courtyard as he began to read.
Dear
Mr. Wellington, I am writing to you not as captain of the royal guard, but as a desperate brother. My 8-year-old sister Lucy has been diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. While we have been blessed with excellent doctors, her condition requires experimental treatment that costs far beyond our family's means. The king paused, letting the words sink in before continuing. I have researched your company's charitable foundation and was inspired by your stated commitment to helping children in need. I am not asking for charity, but for a chance to save an innocent life. I would be willing to work additional duties, donate my salary, or provide any service in exchange for help with Lucy's medical expenses. Marcus's hands began to tremble. As memories flooded back, he remembered that letter now. It had been forwarded to his office, along with hundreds of other requests for donations. His assistant had placed it in a pile marked charity requests that Marcus rarely bothered to review personally. The letter was signed with deepest respect and hope. James Morrison, King Edward concluded, dulling the paper carefully. Do you remember this letter, Mr. Wellington? Marcus swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. I receive many requests for assistance. My charitable foundation handles. Your assistant responded to Captain Morrison's letter, the king interrupted, pulling out another piece of paper. Would you like me to read that response as well? The crowd leaned forward, sensing they were about to hear something that would change everything. King Edward's voice grew cold as he read, "Dear Mr. Morrison, Wellington Technologies receives thousands of requests for charitable donations each year. Unfortunately, we cannot provide assistance for individual medical cases. We suggest you contact government welfare services or local charity organizations. Please do not contact our company again regarding this matter." A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Several people put their hands over their mouths in shock. Marcus felt as though the ground was crumbling beneath his feet. "The letter was signed by your personal assistant," the king continued, "but it carried your company's official seal and was sent on your authority. Captain Morrison received this rejection just 3 days before his sister's condition became critical." Captain Morrison remained at attention, but those close enough could see tears forming in the corner of his eyes. Not tears of anger or self-pity, but tears of remembered pain and desperation. "What happened next, Captain Morrison?" King Edward asked gently. The captain's voice was steady, but filled with emotion. "Your Majesty, my sister's condition deteriorated rapidly. The doctors said we had perhaps weeks left to arrange the treatment. My family held fundraisers, neighbors donated what they could, and my wife's church organized collection drives." Marcus felt sick to his stomach as he listened to the story unfold. "We raised enough money for the first round of treatment," Captain Morrison continued. "Lucy responded better than expected, but she needed additional procedures. That's when something extraordinary happened." The captain paused, looking directly at Marcus. "An anonymous donor came forward and paid for all of Lucy's remaining treatment, over £300,000. The donor insisted on remaining unnamed, but they saved my sister's life." King Edward stepped forward. "Mr. Wellington, do you want to know who that anonymous donor was?" Marcus shook his head slowly, though he was beginning to suspect the truth. "It was me," the king said simply. "I learned about Captain Morrison's situation through palace staff, who were organizing their own fundraising efforts. I made the donation anonymously because I didn't want recognition. I wanted to help because it was the right thing to do." The crowd was completely silent now, absorbing the full impact of the story. "Lucy Morrison is now 11 years old and completely healthy," King Edward continued. "She's an honor student who wants to become a doctor so she can help sick children, like herself. She volunteers at her local hospital, reading stories to young patients undergoing treatment." Marcus felt tears stinging his eyes as he realized the full magnitude of what he had done. He had struck the man whose family's desperate plea he had coldly rejected years earlier. "So you see, Mr. Wellington," the king said, his voice carrying across the courtyard like a judgment, "when you decided to assault Captain Morrison for not bowing to your wealth and power, you weren't just attacking a royal guard, you were attacking a man whose family I personally saved because you refused to show even the smallest amount of human compassion." Marcus Wellington stood in the palace courtyard, surrounded by hundreds of witnesses and countless cameras, feeling smaller than he had ever felt in his entire life. The weight of his actions crashed down on him like a tidal wave he had struck. A man whose dying sister he had refused to help, a man whose family had been saved by the very king he was supposed to meet with. "Your Majesty," Marcus whispered, his voice breaking, I didn't remember. I received so many requests, and You didn't remember," King Edward repeated, his words cutting through Marcus's excuses like a blade. "You didn't remember because a dying child's life wasn't important enough to occupy space in your mind." Captain Morrison remembered every detail of his sister's fight for life, but you couldn't be bothered to remember rejecting his plea for help. The tears Marcus had been fighting finally began to flow down his cheeks. For the first time in decades, the powerful CEO felt the full weight of his own HEARTLESSNESS. Captain Morrison stepped forward, his voice gentle, despite everything that had happened. "Your Majesty, if I may speak?" King Edward nodded. The captain looked at Marcus with an expression that held no hatred or anger, only sadness. "Mr. Wellington, I want you to know that I never blamed you personally for refusing to help Lucy. You didn't know her. You didn't see her lying in that hospital bed, scared and confused about why she was so sick." Marcus looked up, confused by the captain's gentle tone. "But today," Captain Morrison continued, when you struck me for doing my job. For treating you with the same respect I show every visitor, you revealed something about yourself that troubles me deeply. You showed that you believe some human beings are worth more than others simply because they have more money. The captain paused, then said something that would echo in Marcus's mind for the rest of his life. The day you rejected my letter. I was heartbroken, but I wasn't angry with you. I was sad for you, because I realized that someone who could turn away from a dying child's need must live in a very lonely world, surrounded by money and power, but empty of the connections that make life meaningful. Marcus collapsed to his knees right there in the palace courtyard, overwhelmed by emotions he had suppressed for years. The cameras captured everything as the billionaire CEO sobbed openly, finally understanding the true cost of his arrogance and selfishness. King Edward approached Marcus and spoke quietly, his voice carrying both authority and compassion. Mr. Wellington, our business meeting is obviously canceled. Your company will not be receiving any contracts from the royal household, but more importantly, you have an opportunity here that many people never get. Marcus looked up through his tears. What? What do you mean? You have the chance to become a different person, the king said. You can choose to learn from this moment and change your life, or you can return to your towers of wealth and power, surrounding yourself with people who will tell you that everyone else was wrong. Captain Morrison extended his hand to help Marcus to his feet. The gesture stunned everyone watching. Here was a man offering kindness to someone who had just assaulted him. Captain Morrison, Marcus said as he stood, his voice shaking. How is Lucy? Is she really okay? She's wonderful, the captain replied with a warm smile. She's playing soccer this season and wants to learn to play the piano. She dreams of traveling to Africa someday to help build hospitals for children. Closed his eyes, picturing the little girl whose life he could have helped save, but chose not to. When he opened them again, something fundamental had changed in his expression. What can I do? Marcus asked quietly. How can I possibly make this right? King Edward and Captain Morrison exchanged glances. The king nodded slightly. Mr. Wellington, Captain Morrison said Lucy's treatment was successful, but there are hundreds of other children facing similar battles. The hospital where she was treated has a waiting list of families who can't afford the care their children need. Marcus wiped his eyes and straightened his shoulders. Tell me what they need. Whatever it costs, whatever it takes. I want to help. Them all. It's not just about money, the captain said gently. It's about seeing these children as real people, not just tax deductions or publicity opportunities. It's about understanding that behind every request for help is a family facing their worst nightmare. Over the following months, video of Marcus Wellington's breakdown in the palace courtyard became one of the most watched clips in internet history. But what happened next surprised everyone even more. Marcus transformed his entire company's approach to charitable giving. He established the Lucy Morrison Foundation, named after the little girl whose story had changed his life. He personally reviewed every request for help and visited hospitals to meet the children his foundation was supporting. Captain Morrison and Marcus became unlikely friends. With the guard helping the businessmen understand what service really meant, Marcus even arranged for Lucy to throw out the first pitch at a Major League Baseball game, fulfilling one of her dreams. Most remarkably, Marcus insisted that the foundation's donations remain anonymous, just as the king's had been, he learned. That true generosity meant helping others without expecting recognition or praise in return. The powerful CEO would once believe that money could buy anything discovered something far more valuable than wealth. The profound joy that comes from using your resources to lift others up rather than tear them down. He learned that real power isn't measured by how many people bow to you, but by how many lives you can touch with kindness. And Captain Morrison continued to serve at the palace, knowing that sometimes the greatest victories come not from fighting battles, but from showing others what honor, dignity, and compassion truly look like.